I'm Mark Schlero, the owner of MS Classic Cars. Today I have the pleasure to present you an absolutely stunning 1966 Chevrolet Corvette convertible with a 427 400 horse. This particular Corvette is hands down the best overall Corvette that we've ever owned from this generation at MS Classic Cars. It's a car that I'm extremely proud to own. It's also one of my favorite color combinations, white with red interior, which is extremely rare, especially for the earlier produced Corvettes. This particular car obviously has been completely restored to show quality standards. It's been judged with the NCRS. It's won a top flight award. It's also been awarded the Untitled Mark of Excellence Award, which is a extremely big deal in the NCRS community. They put the car through a very vigorous judging process. Everything in the car has to be scrutinized and it has to be in working order, et cetera, et cetera. So not a ton of cars have been awarded the Untitled Mark of Excellence, which makes this car very desirable. Before I get into the condition of the car and some of the things that are included with the car, I want to read something. I normally don't do this. I obviously couldn't memorize all this, so I want to read this report here. This was done by a good friend of mine. His name is Roy Siner. He's from Siner Prestige Automobiles in Oklahoma. For anybody who doesn't know who he is, he was the judging chairman for the NCRS for almost 20 years. He's extremely well respected in the Corvette community. He's written books. I mean, he is really the go-to person when it comes time for Corvettes. Once again, he's become a good friend of mine. So anytime I have a Corvette, I call him, run it by him first, and then once I get the car here, I have him come in and certify the car. It's really worth it. I would recommend if you are looking at a Corvette or want one certified that you contact him as well. So to talk a little bit about this particular car, and the reason I'm going to read this to you is because this is really interesting. It's just this basically paragraph here directly from his report. So one of the first things people always ask is how many Corvettes were built with these options. Fortunately, published GM records for this Corvette will allow us to get close on this car, but not exact. Before we get too far into this short dissertation of an early 66 production history is necessary. In 1966, GM found itself in a unique situation. They offered a 427 cubic inch engine with 400 horsepower and 450 horsepower configuration for a short period of time. It says see Exhibit A of the report. He has an original validated window sticker showing 400 horsepower 427-66 convertible, which was built about a week after the car's build date as proof of this statement. The urban legend says the insurance companies were barking at the horsepower per cubic inch of the 427, 450 configuration. In mid-October of 1965, a letter was issued from GM advertising all dealerships to change the horsepower labels on the 450 and 400 horsepower engines to 425 and 390 respectively. The engines were not changed or resigned. They were the same engines. GM just rated their horsepower at a lower RPM. In fact, that earlier cars were rated at higher horsepower and produced higher horsepower labels. This is one of those cars that would have fallen into that category. Does that make it rare? In my book, it does make it desirable because you would prefer to buy a low production 400 horse car than a fairly high production 390 horse car from the factory. I personally would take the 400. Here's what I can tell you with the same certainty. 5,116 produced 1966 RPO L36 Corvettes were built. From this point forward, you can get facts from the ECL code breaks and assumptions which must be made that shall hold, but there are no guarantees. They did not hold. For example, approximately 3,300 Corvettes had been built with the letter was released that only 12% of the total production had been eligible to be built as 400 horsepower or approximately 609 units. Think about that, 609 units were produced. 64% of the 66 production was a convertible. That percentage holds for the L36 option. 64% of them were convertibles. I personally believe it does. So I estimate that approximately 365 convertibles were built with the 400 horsepower configuration. That's an extremely, extremely low number. Now we come to the color. 7.6% of all 66 Corvettes were ermine white. I think that percentage also holds that it would mean the normal balance should apply to the selection of the 400 427's option is white. I would estimate that 28 400 horsepower L36 convertibles were built in white. They were 8 regular production interior color options. If we assume that split was equal across the board, 12.5 would have been red. I happen to think that this is high, but let's use it anyway with 12.5 red interior, effectively for 4 cars. The kicker, the build of your car that really narrows this down to a small number of similar built vehicles is a 3.336 posi traction, which 10% were built with that rear axle ratio. That moves yours to number 1. Based on that fact, I can count the number of real red-white 400 horsepower L36 convertibles I've seen in my 40 plus years of involvement in depths in the hobby in one hand, this being the only one I have ever seen. I suspect that my number might be very accurate. So I thought that I would read that to you because when you're talking Corvettes, you're talking rarity. He believes this could be the only car known to exist, maybe only 4 that were ever built, as an early car, one of those 600 and change earlier cars that had a 427 with the 400 horse label on it. We've went ahead and even made the air cleaner say 400 for that purpose only, which came out really cool. And again, only 4 vehicles, roughly. It could be 3, it could be 5, but he said 4 cars had the white with the red interior, which makes this car, again, extremely rare and truly a one-of-a-kind find. So to talk a little bit more about this particular car, as I've mentioned, it's won the Duntov Mark of Excellence Award, which will be included. Obviously, the top flight had to be done before that, so that's included as well, the judging sheets. I bought this car from a gentleman that had it for like 12 years. He bought it from a gentleman who had it as part of his collection. So this vehicle has never really seen the internet as far as it being marketed heavily for sale. It's never been to an auction or anything like that since it's been completed. So it's kind of been undercover, so to speak, until now. It does have a hardtop. That's another rare feature to find with these cars. The hardtop fits it absolutely beautifully. We have pictures of it with the hardtop on. We ordered a brand new stand for the hardtop. So once again, you can check that out within our listing. It also has an extra set of wheels and tires. It's got the turbine style wheels with the radial tires. We went ahead and put on the correct tires that you see here. They're brand spanking new with the kind of the gold line and so forth. And it also has the correct style hubcaps on it as well. The exterior body is absolutely beautiful. The paint is super high quality. It's got an unbelievable look on the outside. Everything was restored to high quality. Once again, it's the nicest Corvette that we've owned from this generation. Looking at the interior, I mean, the interior speaks for itself. Everything is new. It's got some of these original tags that are still on here for judging purposes. Everything is in working order, including the clock, which is working here perfectly. The engine compartment is highly detailed. Obviously, it's got the 427, 400 horse. It's got the 4-speed transmission. We already talked about the rear end. The undercarriage is super detailed. I cannot say in words how beautiful this car looks in person. I've had the pleasure to drive it. It runs beautiful. It drives beautiful. We've serviced it completely, which is documented within our description. So you got to check it out. For a complete description with tons of photos, visit msclassiccars.com. I'm going to go ahead and start it and let you listen how beautiful it runs. It starts like that every single time. To get a motor, especially a 427, 400 horsepower motor, to start like that, it's not an easy task. At MS Classic Cars, we go above and beyond to dial these motors in so they can flip with the start of the key. One more time, I'm going to go ahead and shut it off. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. That is precise tuning is what that is. A car I'm very proud of. Thank you.